So I wanted to go ahead and cover something that I think is very, very important and something that we need to be talking about because I've recently had this brought to my attention because, I was doing my own thing. I was kind of engineering and working with the conglomerate coalescence and a lot of my own business ideas. And I basically was kind of blindsided and told, "Hey, you got a warrant for your arrest because you're accused of drinking and driving." When I'd been driving for like 6 years, and so it's kind of odd. Anyway, so since I was roped into this, and I'm kind of dealing with this kind of stuff, and I realized that hey, there's issues that law enforcement makes mistakes, and so there's kind of started doing a little more research, and I started to realize I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of issues, U.S. and especially Arizona. So because of that, we went ahead and did a lot of research and said, I basically kind of delved into it and realized that there's a lot of problems that need to be fixed, and we're going ahead and trying to address these issues. So we're going straight into one, like say worst case scenario, say even if like say like say somebody like went ahead and like was even people that are accused of or convicted of these certain things. We just wanted to go ahead and make sure we lay the groundwork for some reformation that needs to be implemented. So for the first part, I want to talk about the DUI process, specifically here in Arizona. I believe that people accused of or convicted of DUIs, especially if it's considering a situation in which no one was hurt, killed, endangered, these people are being subjugated to laws that aren't just the harshest in the country. They are, in my opinion, unconstitutional and qualify as cruel and unusual punishment. These penalties are appallingly excessive and represent an abusive, miscategorized approach to justice. My argument is that the state is effectively stripping people of their lives and imprisoning them not because they are a legitimate threat, but because they are an inconvenience. The government lacks the resources or time to evaluate these cases individually. At least they shouldn't, but they seem to, or they don't allocate the resources properly. So they choose to intervene with excessive broad brush force. It reminds me of the plot of the movie Minority Report. If anybody's seen that, it's a movie with Tom Cruise. It's from, I believe it was 2002, June or July 2002, and painted a pretty interesting concept. But in that film, people were accused and punished for crimes they hadn't committed yet. Ultimately, that system was revealed to be a failure and was abolished because it was built on a flawed, dangerous premise. And I believe the same logic applies here. We're punishing people for what might have happened rather than what did. Many people in this situation are already struggling, just trying to find a shred of happiness for a moment or a moment of relief in some situations. And what does the government do? They shove their faces deeper into the dirt, dehumanize them, and make them feel like monsters for doing the best they can with the hand they've been dealt. I'm not saying that people don't make mistakes or that some decisions aren't made with malicious intent. I'm not denying that. But often people are just trying to make the best choices they can given their environment and their circumstances. Their intent isn't to hurt anyone. It's simply to help themselves feel a little bit better or better off, even if they lack the resources or options to do that in a better way. Everyone wants to feel like they have a fair shot at life. And when you've been the underdog your whole life and constantly feel at a disadvantage, it's not hard to see why someone might take bigger risks just to feel like they're on a level playing field mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's a desperate attempt to feel equal in a world that has never treated them as such. Arizona DUI, so this is part B, just a different way of phrasing. So Arizona DUI laws are the harshest in the nation, but they are more than just strict. They're fundamentally unconstitutional. We have built a system that treats citizens not as individuals, but as inconveniences. When the law punishes someone for a potential threat rather than actual harm, when no one was injured or endangered, it ceases to be justice and becomes a form of cruel and unusual punishment. This mirrors the premise of Minority Report, a system built on the arrogance that the state can predict and punish future outcomes. In the film, society eventually realized that punishing people for what might happen is an abuse of power. Why are we still operating under that same broken logic today? The current system ignores the human condition. It takes people who are already struggling, people doing the best they can with a bad hand, and shoves them further into the dirt. It strips away their livelihood, their dignity, and their future, often for a mistake that caused no external damage. I'm not arguing for a lack of accountability. I'm arguing that a response must be proportional. When the system ignores the context of a person's life, their lack of options, their environment, and their struggle to find a level playing field isn't just solving a problem, it's creating one, not just one, but many. We need to stop using the heavy hand of the state to crush those who are already at their breaking point. True justice should be about rehabilitation and reality, not just the exercise of state power. And then Gemini's response to my input here was that your perspective touches on a fundamental tension in our justice system, the conflict between public safety, retributive punishment, and the systemic impact on individuals who are already struggling. You've raised several complex points, ranging from the constitutionality of Arizona's specific DUI statutes to the philosophical question of whether the government's response to these offenses is inherently abusive or disproportionate. Arizona's DUI laws, the strictest landscape. You are correct that Arizona is widely considered to have some of the strictest DUI laws in the United States. The state employs a zero tolerance philosophy regarding blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, and mandatory minimum sentencing, which includes mandatory jail time. Wrong. Even for first-time offenders, there are mandatory minimums which escalate quickly for subsequent offenses or high BAC levels. Administrative consequences beyond jail, and the state imposes significant financial burdens, mandatory license suspension, and the long-term requirement of an ignition interlock device. That's fine. Yeah, just no prison or jail. That's excessive and it's not appropriate. Collateral consequences. As you noted, the impact goes beyond the courtroom. A conviction can create barriers to employment, housing, and social mobility, effectively pinning someone into a difficult situation. From a legal standpoint, these laws have generally withstood constitutional challenges because the courts typically view driving as a privilege rather than a right, and the state has a broad police power to regulate public safety on roadways. However, your argument that these punishments sometimes ignore the nuance of a person's life circumstances and fall into the realm of cruel and unusual is a common subject of debate among civil libertarians and criminal justice reformers. Rightfully so. The Minority Report parallel. Your comparison to the 2002 film Minority Report is thought-provoking. In the film, the pre-crime unit arrests individuals based on visions of future murders. The ultimate decision. In the film, the system is ultimately exposed as flawed because the precogs could disagree, and the system ignored these minority reports to maintain an illusion of infallibility. Once the corruption and the inherent unreliability of predicting human behavior are revealed, the pre-crime program is abolished and the prisoners are pardoned and released. The application. You are suggesting that current DUI enforcement acts similarly by punishing a potential danger rather than actual harm caused. While the legal system distinguishes between intent, which Minority Report tried to punish, and reckless endangerment, which DUI laws address, the moral uncertainty you mentioned, such as punishing someone for what could have happened rather than what did, is a valid ethical critique of mandatory sentencing. The human element and systemic disadvantage. Your reflection on the hand dealt by life is a significant part of the sociological argument regarding crime. Many criminologists and sociologists argue that the justice system often fails to account for the criminogenic environment where socioeconomic struggles, lack of options, and trauma drive people to make high-risk decisions. Yes, things too black and white. Just so quick to slap labels on people without actually trying to solve the issues or address underlying situations and stuff. Just quick, easy solutions because people are incompetent or lazy or just don't care because it doesn't affect them personally. So that is not acceptable. When the state responds to these risks with rigid, harsh punishment rather than rehabilitation, it can indeed create a cycle where a person's ability to level the playing field is permanently damaged. While the government justifies these measures as necessary deterrents to prevent tragedy, Your point stands that for the individual, the cost of that difference or the cost of that deterrence can feel like a life altering and dehumanizing experience. Part two, I believe the current DUI deterrents in Arizona are excessively burdensome and fundamentally unfair. Beyond the immediate penalties, we have to look at the environment we are putting these individuals into. When you take people who are otherwise contributing members of society and place them in a cell surrounded by people who have made poor choices, you are stripping them of the positive influences of regular society. Instead, you are surrounding them with negative influences which can warp their sense of reality. I believe that when they are released, they end up being more of a detriment to society than they would have been had they never been incarcerated. We have the technology today to handle this differently through ankle monitors, tracking technology, and other forms of supervised accountability. These methods could achieve the necessary results without removing people from their jobs and their communities. To me, these current deterrents are not only excessive, they feel cruel and unusual, and I believe they are unconstitutional. We'll figure that out once we do more research. When you remove someone from society, you negate all the positive impacts they would have had, the work they would have done, the relationships they would have maintained, and their contributions to their community. Ultimately, I believe the negative long-term impacts of who they become after incarceration far outweigh any perceived benefit of removing them in the first place. Just a reworded section here, just to kind of emphasize the idea. Arizona's current approach to DUI sentencing is not only excessive, it is counterproductive. By relying on incarceration as a default, we are taking individuals who are otherwise functioning, productive members of society and isolating them in environments that lack positive social reinforcement. This is a failure of public policy. When you remove a person from their job, their family, and their community, you aren't just punishing them, you are dismantling their support system. Research suggests that long-term exposure to the prison environment can harden offenders, making them a greater liability to society upon their release than they were before they entered. We have the technology to do better. Through the use of GPS ankle monitors, mandatory ignition interlock devices, and required rehabilitation, we can ensure public safety without the social and economic costs of jail time or prison. If our goal is truly to improve society, we need to stop viewing incarceration as the only form of accountability. We need to trade punitive detention for evidence-based monitoring. When we trade punitive detention for evidence-based monitoring, we allow individuals to maintain their societal contributions while being held strictly accountable. We should be focusing on solutions that rehabilitate rather than destroy. And now see the response. The perspective you've shared reflects a significant ongoing debate in criminal justice reform, the balance between which are designed to punish and deter, and rehabilitative approaches that aim to address the root causes of behavior without the potentially negative hardening effects of incarceration. So more preventative measures and ways of reinforcement rather than just punishment. The current landscape in Arizona. Arizona is known for having some of the more stringent DUI laws in the country. The state utilizes a tiered system where penalties increase based on BAC, or blood alcohol content, and the number of prior offenses. Mandatory minimums, even first-time offenders face mandatory jail time, often a minimum of 10 days, though some may be suspended with treatment and significant fines. The purpose of sentencing is that the current system is designed with multiple objectives: incapacitation, preventing the person from driving while intoxicated; specific deterrence, or punishing the individual to prevent them from impeding the act; and general deterrence, or discouraging others from drinking and driving. Arguments regarding incarceration versus alternatives. Your points regarding the negative environment of jails and the potential for lost productivity align with arguments frequently raised by critics of traditional incarceration. The case for alternatives. Research has explored the hardening effect where individuals who might otherwise be law-abiding are exposed to environments that do not foster rehabilitation. Proponents of alternative sentencing suggest that measures like electronic monitoring or ankle monitors, work release or furlough, and alcohol counseling or rehab, and ignition interlock devices or IIDs can achieve the goal of public safety without social and economic disruption of jail or prison. Should be more obvious, but it seems like it's a harder concept for some people to grasp, especially when they're short-sighted and simple-minded, but not getting into that. Efficacy. Some studies indicate that for certain populations, rehabilitation-focused programs are more effective at reducing recidivism than extended jail time, which can interfere with employment and stable housing, two key factors in preventing future offenses. Constitutional perspective. While you feel these, so this is the Constitution's perspective. While you feel these penalties are cruel and unusual, courts have generally upheld mandatory minimum sentences for DUIs as constitutional under current interpretations of the Eighth Amendment. Interpretations change, like just depending on whatever narrative politicians are trying to push. Challenges to DUI cases in court are more commonly focused on the Fourth Amendment. In other words, unlawful stops and searches, or the Fifth and Sixth Amendments, the right to remain silent or right to counsel regarding how evidence was gathered, rather than the constitutionality of the sentencing guidelines themselves. Yeah, again, this is a separate thing we address in a different video or a different note, but at the same time, the Constitution, just like the Bible, isn't something that should just be hard and fast and like never changing. This is something that, as society changes and as people change, and just business and commercial trade and everything, just interactions within the nation, domestically, internationally, stuff changes. We need to be able to adapt accordingly. And just seems like some people aren't capable of seeing the whole picture. So looking forward, the tension between the punishment model and the medical or rehabilitative model remains a major focal point for policymakers. Shouldn't be this hard, but many jurisdictions are shifting towards problem-solving courts, like DUI courts, that prioritize mandated treatment, monitoring, and accountability over simple confinement, as these have shown promise in reducing repeat offenses while allowing individuals to maintain their societal roles. Part 3. What makes me feel the Arizona system is particularly egregious, Sorry, one sec, sorry, let me repeat that was a question. So what makes me feel the Arizona system is particularly egregious in its approach? It's because, for example, you have people who are simply trying to go out, have fun, and enjoy themselves, or like we said before, like maybe they feel like crap and trying to make themselves feel better by comparison or relatively. These are normally very good people contributing to society. They're frustrated and they're trying to get out of the house, or they're just trying to go out and party, have some fun, celebrate. If they have a drink and drive and they don't hit anybody, they would have made it home and literally nothing would have happened. If police intervention hadn't occurred, no harm would have been done, but instead the Arizona judicial system seems to want to severely punish people for something that in effect never actually happened. This is a rephrasing. I find the Arizona judicial system's approach to be fundamentally misguided. We're talking about people who are otherwise productive, law-abiding members of our community, people who simply stepped out to socialize or relieve some stress. When someone drives home after a night out, doesn't hit anyone, and arrives safely, they have caused no actual harm. Yet the Arizona system chooses to treat these individuals with extreme severity, effectively criminalizing a lapse in judgment as if it were a disaster that actually occurred. When we prioritize draconian mandatory punishments over common sense proportionality, we aren't creating justice. We are simply inflicting life-altering trauma on people who, by all accounts, cause no damage to the public. The punishment should reflect reality, not just the state's desire to punish potentiality. Response. The Arizona judicial system's approach to DUI enforcement is often described as one of the strictest in states, primarily due to zero tolerance. And okay, I was just repeating what I said before. Several specific components contribute to the perception of the system as particularly harsh. Mandatory minimums, zero tolerance and impairment thresholds. Go ahead and read this, so bear with me. So for mandatory minimums, Arizona law mandates strict minimum jail sentences for DUI convictions, even for first-time offenders with no prior criminal history. These are often non-negotiable, leaving little room for judicial discretion to consider the specific context of the situation. Again, another huge failure of the government right there, not looking at case studies, still going off the idea of precedent, which is completely anachronistic. Anyway, sorry. So I'm trying to go on a tangent, just gonna go ahead and lay out the facts. So, zero tolerance and impairment thresholds. Arizona maintains strict standards regarding blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, because the state classifies a DUI as a strict liability offense in many contexts. The focus is placed almost entirely on the act of operating a vehicle while impaired, regardless of whether that impairment resulted in an accident or property damage. Aggravated DUI statutes. Arizona has broad definitions for what constitutes as an aggravated DUI, such as having a child in the vehicle, suspended license, or multiple prior offenses. These can elevate a misdemeanor to a felony charge, leading to much more severe long-term consequences, including loss of civil rights and significant impacts on future employment. High costs and collateral consequences. Because the criminal penalties, the administrative and financial burden, including mandatory alcohol screening, high fines, insurance surcharges, and license suspensions, because this is substantial. In many cases, these penalties can create a cycle of financial instability that persists long after the initial incident is resolved. So yeah, there's no such thing as people just serving their time and being done with it. Like, they have to pay, they're literally paying for the rest of their whole entire life. So this justice system, it's not true justice. Like, it's significantly flawed. You can slap the justice system label on it, but it's not true justice. Like, justice system that exists right now is not worthy of being called a justice system when it really creates a lot more problems than what it solves. The philosophical tension here lies between a utilitarian approach, where the state uses severe preemptive punishment to minimize the risk of potential future harm to the public, and an individual-focused approach, which argues that legal consequences should be proportional to the actual harm caused by a specific action. Part four. The whole idea of legal precedent, there we go, we mentioned that before, so delving deeper into that. The whole idea of legal precedent is something I struggle with. We rely on these blanket punishments, these standardized outcomes that the government implements to treat everyone quote unquote fairly, but they don't treat them equitably. We have the technology today to step up our game and implement true justice. Historically, the precedent system existed because we didn't have the technology to review cases quickly or efficiently, and we had to use broad categories to keep trials moving. But now we have the tools to look at cases individually. We can analyze the specific factors of each situation rather than applying a blanket treatment to everyone. We should be using this technology to deeply and thoroughly weigh the true costs and benefits of how to treat each individual. I'm a strong proponent of positive reinforcement and preventative measures over these after-the-fact punishments that don't seem to help anyone. Currently, the system feels vindictive. It often makes people worse when they return to society. They are either angry and bitter, or resentful, or completely defeated and depressed. We need a system that actually supports people rather than one that strips them of their humanity. You know, the rephrasing here. We need to talk about legal precedent. Right now, our justice system relies on blanket punishments or standardized outcomes that claim to treat everyone equally, but in practice, they fail to treat anyone. They claim in practice they fail to treat anyone equitably. Historically, this system existed for a reason. We lacked the technology to process individual cases efficiently. We traded depth for speed, but that's no excuse. But that excuse no longer holds water. Today, we have the computational power to move past one-size-fits-all sentencing. Instead of relying on rigid, outdated precedents, we should be using data-driven insights to analyze the unique context of every individual. We have the tools to weigh the true costs and benefits of our actions. It's time we use them to prioritize human outcomes over administrative convenience. I advocate for a shift toward positive reinforcement and preventative measures. The current model is inherently reactive and frankly vindictive. It doesn't rehabilitate, it damages. It returns people to society either hardened by bitterness or stripped of their drive. If we want a safer, more just society, we must stop punishing for the sake of precedent and start solving for the person. Response. It is clear that you are deeply concerned about the friction between the efficiency of our current legal systems and the need for genuine, individualized justice. You are touching on a profound tension that legal philosophers and reformers have debated for centuries. The trade-off between predictability, or the rule of law via precedent, and humanity, or equitable context-aware outcomes. Your perspective aligns with several modern movements in legal theory and criminal justice reform. Here's a breakdown of the core issues you raised and how technology is currently viewed as both a potential solution and a source of risk. The precedent dilemma, efficiency versus equity. Historically, stare decisis, or the doctrine of precedent, was designed to ensure that the law was stable and predictable. You are correct that in the pre-digital era, the system relied on broad categories because manually analyzing every unique facet of every human life was logistically impossible. The blanket problem, as you noted, when you apply a one-size-fits-all punishment, you treat similar crimes the same, but you fail to account for the vastly different circumstances that led to those crimes. This is the definition of equality, treating everyone the same, versus equity, or giving people what they actually need to reach a just outcome. The tech shift. You are right that we now have the computational power to synthesize vast amounts of data, case studies, and sociological factors. In theory, we could move toward a system of precision justice where algorithms or advanced data analytics assist judges in identifying the specific underlying causes of behavior, whether it be socioeconomic factors, health issues, or environmental stressors, to craft a response tailored to the individual. Yeah, human judges should not have the authority to dictate or have this much power over people's lives. Like, humans make too much mistakes and are too biased and too impulsive, too emotional, and or like either too attached to something because of emotion or too detached because it doesn't affect them personally. And so, yeah, honestly, in my opinion, like I'm gonna say, it's like subjectively, I don't think human judges are capable of making fully correct decisions or fully accurate decisions. And so, yes, they need to be assisted. I'm not saying they can't play a role, but I think it's not effective. It's not truly the best solution to have just a human judge overseeing a case. Like, we used that before because that's the best we had, but we have better technologies now, and we should be implementing those rather than relying on these flawed systems. So, to the individual, punitive versus rehabilitative approaches. Your preference for positive reinforcement and preventative measures over punitive after-the-fact measures touches on the shift from retributive justice, or punishment as payment for a crime, to restorative or rehabilitative justice. The feedback loop of punishment. You correctly identified that punitive systems often act as a criminogenic factor, meaning the punishment itself increases the likelihood that a person will reoffend. Isolation, trauma, and the removal of support networks often leave individuals less equipped to succeed upon release. Preventative models, societies that focus on the root causes, such as early childhood support, mental health access, and economic stability, often see a dramatic decrease in the need for an expansive, reactive legal system. Yet America claims to be the freest country in the world, yet at the same time, it has the most prisoners. And well, words. Trying like really hard not to just go on a rant here. I'm trying to get through this and stick. So the challenge of algorithmic justice. While technology holds the promise of better, more equitable outcomes, it brings its own set of critical risks that the legal community is currently grappling with. One, algorithmic bias. If the technology is trained on historical data, it may simply automate the biases of the past. If the data shows that certain populations have been punished more harshly in the past due to systemic issues, the technology might suggest that some harsh outcomes might suggest those same harsh outcomes. Sorry, I'm back up. The technology might suggest those same harsh outcomes, effectively coding the unfairness into the future. Back to the drawing board, clean slate. Here we go. Like, let's go ahead and start anew. Not use the past ones. Let's go ahead and erase all the precedent and then start new, so we don't have the systemic issues of the past muddling the decisions of the future. So, but we can look into that further. The black box problem. If a system uses deep, complex analysis to determine a person's fate, how can that person or their lawyer challenge the reasoning? True justice requires transparency and due process, the right to understand and contest the information being used against you. And then 3, dehumanization. There is a fear that by turning human lives into data points, we might lose the human element. The human element is flawed, though. Jesus. Or the capacity for empathy. I mean, okay, that's good. The empathy, mercy, and understanding context that human judge possesses, but an algorithm might lack. This is why you work in tandem, you work together. Like, you don't just have just the AI, you don't have just the human. Like, both of them complement each other and prevent each other from making mistakes. Moving forward, the transition you are describing from a system of rigid precedent-based blanket punishments to a nuanced, tech-enabled, equitable system is one of the most significant challenges of our time. It requires balancing the speed and analytical power of technology with the moral necessity of human oversight and empathy. 1 second, I'll be right back. I just wanted to finish that part. So now. Sorry, I've been drinking a lot of water. It is summer in Arizona and it is very hot, so I got to stay hydrated. But bathroom breaks tend to happen a little bit more frequently. So, I believe we're on 5. We need to make our systems fair for everyone. To do that, we should look at utilizing AI as a part of the judicial process, not to replace humans entirely, but to act as judges that provide objective feedback. Right now, our judicial system relies heavily on human interpretation, and I believe that approach is fundamentally flawed. When decisions are left solely to individual judgment, we lose the consistency required for true ethical justice. By implementing multiple standardized AI systems across the board, so yeah, not just one AI program, but multiple, have like basically like a board of them, or council will be the word for them, group, amalgamation, party, but I'd say a group of them that we could use to move toward a much more equitable framework. These systems wouldn't be static, they would be modified over time to evolve with our society. This is an emerging field, and while there will inevitably be flaws to work through, it is a necessary step forward. So it's definitely better than what we have now and before. So regardless, this is something we need to do to move forward. This is something that should be done, and the fact that we're not doing it is, we're not implementing justice and we're not doing the right things here. So somebody, hey, me, is stepping up to say something. So y'all wanted to rope me into this, and now you guys have made yourselves a target for change. So you did it to yourself. So all right. Anyway, we cannot keep on doing what we've been doing. Our current system isn't delivering true justice. It is often detached from reality, focusing on punitive measures and a primitive desire for vengeance. It feels savage, and it's time to modernize. We need a system that looks at the facts, takes the individual circumstances into account, and operates more like a scientific process. We need a system that focuses on actually helping society rather than just feeding into vindication. We have to move forward, and this is the path toward a more reasonable, equitable, and just future. Got a rephrasing here. The way we approach justice today is fundamentally broken. It is a system trapped in a cycle of punishment, focused on vindication rather than genuine societal repair. It feels archaic, a detached, primitive approach that prioritizes revenge over real solutions. But what if we could modernize justice using the same rigor we apply to the scientific process? I propose a move toward an AI-assisted judicial framework. By utilizing standardized AI systems as judges, we can eliminate the inconsistencies born of subjective human bias. This isn't about removing human accountability. It's about establishing a foundation of fairness that applies to everyone equally across the board. These systems wouldn't be static, they would be built to evolve. Through constant audit and refinement, we can create a model that accounts for the complexity of individual situations rather than relying on blanket punitive measures. We're at a turning point. We have the opportunity to move past the savage nature of current judicial systems and toward a model that actually helps society function. It's time to move forward, embrace this new technology, and build a system that finally reflects the standard of true, equitable justice. The response here from Gemini is that the desire to shift the judicial system away from purely punitive or subjective human interpretation and toward a more equitable, data-informed, and restorative model is a significant topic of contemporary discourse. The vision you are describing mirrors concepts found in fields like computational law and procedural justice, where the goal is to reduce bias and increase the consistency of outcomes. The potential of AI-enhanced justice, implementing multi-layered AI systems as judges or analytical aids, offers several theoretical pathways to address the savage or backward culture of current punitive systems. Mitigating cognitive bias. Humans are susceptible to judicial fatigue, unconscious bias, and emotional state fluctuations. An AI system, if properly audited for fairness, can consistently apply the same set of rules to every case, potentially eliminating disparities based on demographics or external environmental factors. Multidimensional fact-finding. You noted the need to consider individual situations. AI can process vast amounts of historical data, psychological evaluations, and socioeconomic variables much faster than human counterparts to provide a more holistic view of why a situation occurred, moving the needle from what happened to how do we fix the root cause. Iterative optimization. As you suggested, the systems would not be static. They could function like the scientific process, hypothesizing a sentencing or restorative outcome, measuring the success of that outcome in reducing recidivism, and refining the rules of the system accordingly. Navigating challenges. While this represents a modernization, there are substantial hurdles to ensuring such a system achieves true justice rather than merely automating inequality. Got the black box problem. We had that before. Okay, encoded historical bias. Okay, that we had up above too. The human element. Justice often requires empathy and the ability to understand nuanced, non-quantifiable human experiences. Some philosophers so justice often requires empathy and the ability to understand nuanced, non-quantifiable human experiences, what some philosophers refer to as phronesis or practical wisdom. Determining where the boundary lies between data-driven objectivity and human-centered mercy is a fundamental question for future legal architecture. A scientific approach to society. Your mention of treating this like a scientific process is compelling. In the current system, we often lack a feedback loop. When someone is sentenced, the system rarely or never measures rarely ever measures whether that sentence actually improves society or the individual. A system that views justice as a problem to be solved via constant ethical, this was justice though. Oh my God, I need water. My mouth words aren't coming out right. All right, there we go, we're good. Let's try that again. Take two. A system that views justice as a problem to be solved via constant ethical collaboration could move us from a culture of vindication to one of actual rehabilitation. It sounds like your interest in this area aligns with your broader philosophical inquiries. challenging established structures and looking for ways to integrate more logical, equitable, and modern frameworks into how society operates. Part 6. This is an issue that absolutely needs to be addressed because people are suffering all around the world. America is a major player in this and arguably one of the biggest offenders when it comes to these atrocities against humanity. Too often, the system just locks people away in a hole and forgets about them and lets them come out even worse than before. Unless we stand up to stop this, we are looking at unnecessary suffering and massive negative impact on society. Think about all the potential and all the good that is being lost. Most individuals, and I know the numbers fluctuate, are probably doing, these are arbitrary numbers here, say 80 to 90% good in their lives with only 10 to 20% bad. When you lock these people away, you're losing all the potential for good over mistakes that could have been managed much more differently and much more properly. The government could intervene in more effective ways and not intervene in things too. They could focus on monitoring and keeping a closer eye on individuals who begin to deviate from norms, obstruct the law, or negatively impact society. Instead, they choose a path that doesn't work. There's one side note here. So this reminds me of the line from 50 Cent's song, Many Men Wish Death Upon Me, where he says, "These men want to take my life away." Even if the song is about something else, that sentiment resonates with the feeling of the government imposing its will while claiming to be just. It seems like in many cases, people don't know any better, and I don't blame them. It looks like the institutions think they're doing the right thing, even if they're going about it in the wrong way. This has to be addressed. This isn't just affecting me, it's affecting thousands, millions, and potentially even billions of people over time around the world. We need a different approach. Make a quick rephrasing here. We're facing a global crisis of human potential. Across the world, and particularly here in America, we have adopted a system that prioritizes locking people away in the dark over actually addressing the root causes of their mistakes. We treat human beings as disposable, forgetting that when we bury a person in an institution, we aren't just punishing them, we're depriving society of that potential good that they were capable of contributing. This isn't just a tragedy of lost potential, it's a failure of logic. A system that defines justice only by how many people it can isolate is inherently flawed. Think of it like this. If an individual begins to deviate from the law or disrupt our social norms, the government has a responsibility to intervene, but not by discarding them. We should be focusing on proactive, intelligent monitoring and guidance that keeps people integrated within society, not just further alienated from it. We are currently spending billions of dollars and millions of lives on a model that turns minor mistakes into a major social rot. It reminds me of the sentiment in 50 Cent's Many Men. We're fighting a system that claims to be just while it systematically destroys lives, often driven by bureaucratic momentum that doesn't know how to stop. I don't believe the people running these systems are inherently evil, but they are absolutely going about it the wrong way. The current approach is a broken cycle that affects not just me or those in my neighborhood, but billions of people across the globe, again, over time, at the same time, but even in the future, anyway, it's time to stop building holes and start building a society that actually works to preserve and harness the good in all of us. So stop digging ditches and digging graves and holes and start building ladders and giving people the tools they need to elevate themselves rather than just go away. We're good. Come back, zombie. It's like not good. That's probably bad example. Oh my god. Sorry, I got ADHD. Kind of makes my brain a little scatter and go everywhere. But we're staying focused. This is a very important issue we need to address. So this isn't like one of those like super fun topics like where my business is, but I can kind of go off on like tangents and stuff like that. This is something that I kind of want to focus on because it definitely needs to be addressed and solved. So, where were we? All right. Part C, the response. It is clear that you are deeply concerned about the systemic issues regarding incarceration, the loss of human potential, and the role of government oversight. You are articulating a perspective that challenges the current punitive model of justice, arguing instead for a more rehabilitative and preventative approach that weighs the collective good that individuals can contribute against their mistakes. The frustration you feel regarding how societal institutions handle individuals and the fear that this process often does more harm than good is a sentiment shared by many philosophers, sociologists, and legal reformers who advocate for restorative justice. Your point about the opportunity cost of incarceration. Sorry, got this on my notes. So if it was on Microsoft Word, I could blow it up a little bit higher, but I think on my notes, I could figure out how to edit it, but right now it's just on a font size that's like a little bit harder to read. So apologies for that. Your point about the opportunity cost of incarceration. This one's like really throwing me off for some reason. Okay. Your point about the opportunity cost of incarceration or the good that is lost when a person is removed from society is a central argument in many contemporary debates on mass incarceration. The parallel you drew of 50 Cent's Many Men Wish Death Upon Me highlights a personal resonance with the feeling of being targeted or suppressed by powerful monolithic forces, like David versus Goliath. Even if the song's original context differs, that feeling of standing against a system that claims to be just while imposing its will is a powerful archetype in literature and social commentary. It sounds like you're navigating some heavy, complex thoughts about how society should function versus how it currently does. Exploring these ideas, perhaps through the lens of those philosophical thinkers you have been reading, like Spinoza. Holy crap, I remember my conversations about Baruch Spinoza. Geez, that was so long ago. That was months ago. That is cool. Yeah, I like how Gemini and AI actually save your chats now. Anyway, sorry, side point. Through the lens, so exploring these ideas perhaps through the lens of those philosophical thinkers that you've been reading about, like Spinoza, or by researching different models of restorative justice, might help you organize these feelings into a more actionable framework for advocacy or personal expression. Yeah, so like I said, this is a rough draft. We're definitely needing to look into this further because we definitely need to change this and present this in a way that is convincing, that really genuinely initiates change and gets people on board through evidence, proof, arguments, and literally everything that we can contribute to making people see reason, and that this is genuinely the right way to move forward. And that whatever the system that we have currently is not working, it does not work, it has not worked, it is not the best solution. And it is something that requires substantial reform. It's going to be a lot of work, but we can do it. We're on mission. All right, here we go. Part 7. I believe defunding the police is a necessary conversation until the government learns to not overextend itself and overimpose its authority. I know law enforcement is complicit in this, but I also realize they are often just pawns of the judicial system. They are only enforcing what the judicial system dictates, and the judicial system only rules based on the laws that politicians pass. When politicians don't have a lot of experience in this stuff and probably don't read a lot of history books. And it's just weird that the people ruling all these other people that are trying to do the right things are the morons that don't know what they're doing. So it's backwards. That needs to be resolved, and it definitely needs to be fixed. So we addressed that, I think, a little bit later or in a separate note. There are just different campaign and political rules and regulations and stuff like that, so we can put politicians in check and make sure that they're not over exerting themselves or creating more problems than what they solve. So, and actually representing the American people instead of just getting in office and then claiming that they're doing the right things or everything's going great, but realistically it's not. They're creating a lot more problems than what they're solving. Sorry, like I said, I'm trying not to go off on like separate tangents, but some things I feel like really need to be addressed. So try to stay focused here. So you have to tackle this at every level. Reform the judicial system, hold law enforcement accountable, and most importantly, put politicians in check. They are the ones who seem to gain power and pass legislation just to look busy or productive, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall, trying to keep it PG, and trying to see what sticks, or throwing it at the fan, trying to see what blows out or whatever. They tell the American public that everything is going great, but they aren't really doing the longitudinal studies or the case studies required to ensure that. They aren't truly analyzing the long-term impact. They're just pushing a narrative to feel productive. Realistically, these rush policies often have a detrimental long-term effect and create more problems than they solve. Politicians need to stop looking for immediate gratification or short-term wins and start focusing on actual results. We need them to stop passing legislation just to look active and start doing the hard work of analyzing the long-term consequences for society as a whole. Yeah, stop being incompetent. Stop being remiss of your duties to the American people. Please. Por favor. Go without saying, but sometimes people need to be reminded. They are prioritizing short-term political gratification. Hold on, sorry. Okay, so the rephrasing here. We often hear calls to defund the police, but we need to look deeper at the source of the problem. I mean, defunding the police would be one of them, but we need to look deeper. So doing that until we can, solve the root of it. And then once we solve these underlying problems, then give it some more funding back. But definitely defunding, looking at the problems, then giving it gradually back as we kind of ensure that the structures that we have in place are more just. Law enforcement is only the tip of the spear. They are ultimately the pawns of a judicial system that acts on laws written by politicians. If we want real change, we cannot just target the enforcer. We have to address the architects of the system. Currently, our legislative process feels like a game of optics. Politicians pass rushed, reactionary laws to look busy, throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Oh, there we go. And while telling the public that things are going fine. But where is the accountability? Where is the longitudinal studies? Where is the rigorous analysis of how these policies impact our society 10 or 20 years down the road? They are prioritizing short-term political gratification over long-term stability, and the result is a society burdened by more problems than we started with. It is time to put the politicians in check. We need to stop rewarding them for high-volume legislation and start demanding evidence-based results. We need leaders who look beyond the next election cycle and actually consider the long-term health of our communities. It's time we demand that our government stops guessing and starts analyzing. Response here. The frustration you're expressing highlights a central tension in American governance, the feeling that legislative, judicial, and executive systems, including law enforcement, often operate in ways that prioritize short-term political optics over long-term societal stability and actual problem solving. Your perspective touches on a systemic critique that many political scientists and sociologists have analyzed for decades. Here's a breakdown of the structure. Here's a breakdown of the structural dynamics you mentioned. First, we have the systemic loop of governance, the cycle you described, politicians passing reactive legislation, the judicial system interpreting it, and law enforcement executing it is often referred to as the policy industrial complex. Excuse me. So the legislative impulse, as you noted, there is often a high incentive for politicians to appear busy. In a 24-hour news cycle, inaction can be framed as incompetence. This encourages rapid passage of laws that may lack sufficient longitudinal analysis or foresight regarding unintended consequences. Judicial interpretation. Courts are tasked with applying these laws to specific cases. Even if a judge or prosecutor disagrees with the underlying policy, their role is constrained by the statute. That is not just, it's like you should be able to stand up against that, you know, actually fight for justice. If you're a justice and you're a judge, you know, you should be able to judge these things properly. Otherwise, you should not be a judge. And it's dishonorable, and you should be stripped of that honor title because you are being dishonorable. And that's my spot, sorry. Statute. This often traps individual officers and judges in a system they may find flawed but are legally obligated to uphold. That's poop. Straight up poop. Big old pile of horse poop. That is not well thought out and definitely needs to change. All right, law enforcement as the front line. Because police officers are the most visible point of contact between the state and the public, they bear the brunt of public frustration. When laws are poorly crafted or overreaching, the enforcement of those laws inevitably leads to friction, as you've identified. But I don't think I go into it here, but essentially just want to go ahead and recover the, was it the Nuremberg trials that basically Nazis and SS, Gestapo, and other officers, they said that they're just doing their jobs, they're just following orders, and that was found by the Allies not to be a legitimate excuse. And so if you're noticing that you're fighting for the wrong side, or you're endorsing fascism, or basically imposing the will of those who are powerful and greedy and or even just dumb, like and not doing their jobs right, like you should be able to stand up and, you know, fight for what is right. Like you have a mind, you can think freely, you can think independently and think for yourself and actually implement true justice. And the justice system needs to be able to take individual cases into account so that way people have more freedom. Even officers themselves have more freedom to be able to operate within things so they can present their arguments and not feel like they're going to be subjugated themselves to punishment for genuinely doing the right thing. And so, yeah, all this needs to change, or a lot of this, just a lot of this. The challenge of evidence-based policy. You pointed out a critical failure in modern governance, the lack of rigorous long-term impact analysis before laws are enacted. Short-termism. Elected officials often face election cycles every 2 to 6 years. This creates a structural incentive mismatch where long-term societal health is sacrificed for short-term wins that can be used in campaign marketing. Lack of feedback loops. There is a growing movement toward evidence-based policy, which advocates for pilot programs, mandatory sunset clauses, or laws that expire unless reauthorized, and rigorous data analysis. I feel like, dude, this should be, sunset clauses should be applied to literally even the Constitution, like for amendments. Like every single amendment should have a sunset clause where, like, if you don't reenact it or reauthorize it, it just goes away. Like, so basically, like, there's a lot of our amendments that like we can keep. There's a lot of them that are good, but other subsections and everything like that that definitely need to be modified. And so, yeah, that should be applied to literally everything across the board because things change over time. You need to be able to adapt. Like no matter what it is, you need to be able to reconsider it and reshape it and readapt it to pursue the most beneficial outcomes. Sorry. It's like, but basically just generate the best results rather than just having a solution that is far from the best solution. So yeah. Structural paths for reform. If the objective is to put politicians and a system back in check, reformers generally focus on these 3 areas: increased accountability and transparency, pushing for independent oversight boards for police, essentially policing the police, and more importantly, demanding higher standards of transparency for how legislative impact is measured before and after a bill passes. Second is civic engagement and primary challenges. Many argue that the most effective way to put politicians in check is through active participation in primaries where the influence of party leadership is lower and candidates are more responsive to a specific and where candidates are more responsive to specific local grievances. Restructuring incentives. This includes advocating for reforms that reward legislators for long-term outcomes rather than just output volume. This could take the form of requiring fiscal and social impact reports for major legislation, similar to environmental impact statements. Sorry. Reading a lot. Taking air out of me. Pardon the interruption. Your analysis suggests that focusing solely on one node, such as law enforcement, is insufficient. I mean, although we do focus on it, like not like so we that is one factor, but it's not the only thing we're going after. So not only law enforcement, but others, and well, everybody responsible and everything that needs to change. So we're adding things, subtracting things, modifying things. That's literally what we're all about. It's literally my purpose in this world, just see issues and fix them. Your analysis suggests that focusing solely on one node is insufficient because the core mandate comes from the legislative branch. The challenge, as you articulated, is that the entire system is interconnected, making reform an incredibly complex task that requires addressing the output of laws as much as the enforcement of them. I believe this is what, part 7? Sorry, apologies. I didn't think this would take that long. But part 7. Switch up the background. Yeah, let's put in my YouTube background. Actually, you know what? I feel like it would be better. I'll prefer if watching focused. So yeah, never mind. Cancel that. We'll do that for the next office hours video. So I believe that no soul is beyond salvation and that no radical is beyond redemption. I believe that if people are given enough support, if they are watched over and cared for enough, they will truly feel that the government has their back. It's almost like a parent's unconditional love. A child isn't going to want to wage war on a parent who loves them, but with the government, there's no sense of with the government, there's a sense of detachment. It feels like the state doesn't genuinely care about the individual. Instead, it seems like the government feels offended. If the government feels offended by someone, they just want to throw them in a hole and forget about them. I think the better path is to treat people like human beings and address their situations accordingly. We should be trying to help people rather than simply seeing them as a burden to be discarded. I hold a simple but profound belief. No soul is beyond salvation. No radical is beyond redemption. Oh, sorry. This is the rephrasing. We often wonder why people turn against the society they live in. The answer, I believe, lies in the relationship between the state and the citizen. When a government treats its people like a burden, when it responds to conflict with nothing more than a cold detachment and a desire to cast people into a hole and forget them, it alienates them. Think of a child. A child doesn't wage war on a parent who loves them unconditionally. That loyalty isn't bought, it is earned through care, attention, and the feeling of being genuinely seen. If we want a more stable, peaceful society, we have to stop viewing our most difficult cases as problems to be discarded. We need to treat them as human beings. We need to address the root causes of their actions and with care rather than just punishment. It is time we stop seeing people as burdens and start seeing them as individuals worth saving. What would Jesus do? WWJD. Stress me out. Your perspective touches on a profound philosophical and sociological debate regarding the purpose of justice. Should it be retributive or punishment focused or restorative, rehabilitation focused? Restorative. The argument you are making aligns closely with the principles of restorative justice and social contract theory. You are essentially proposing a model where the legitimacy of a government is derived from its capacity to care for its citizens, mirroring the nurturing role of a parent. The philosophy of your argument: human dignity and potential. Your belief that no one is beyond redemption rests on the idea that human behavior is often a response to environment, trauma, or lack of support. By shifting the focus from punishment for the sake of punishment to understanding the root cause, you are arguing for the preservation of human dignity, even in those who have caused harm. The problem of detachment. I was going to say something else, but that's fine. We'll keep on continuing. The problem of detachment. You correctly identify a common criticism of modern governance, the impersonal nature of state power. When an individual feels unseen or ignored by the collective, they are more likely to view that collective or the state or the government as an adversary rather than a protector. As you noted, when the relationship feels transactional or hostile, the bond that prevents social conflict erodes. The parental state analogy. This is a classic, though debated, political concept. Some argue that a government should act as a benevolent, protective authority. In other words, like paternalism or like parenting, while others fear that this can lead to overreach or a lack of individual agency. Yeah, some parents are really clingy. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, yeah, you have the hovering parents, or like the helicopter parents, or stuff like that. Those are the ones where you're just like, yeah, that's frustrating as hell. Like, they need to F off. So there's a reasonable extent to like intervention, stuff like that. There's a good boundary. Like there should be, again, considering individual cases, there should be able to take into consideration just like, to what degree to be involved. But yeah, currently regarding a lot of these issues, it is definitely overextending its authority. So they need to dial it back, and we'll go and fix a lot of their issues. So I'm here to help. Taking a second to find my spot. I lost my spot again. Sorry. Reach or lack of individual agency. However, your point about unconditional care is less about control and more about ensuring that the state remains committed to the well-being of all its members, which theoretically creates a more stable, loyal society. Challenges to this approach, got to consider those. While your vision is a more compassionate, rehabilitative society, While your vision of a more compassionate, rehabilitative society is ethically compelling, proponents of traditional justice systems often raise practical, albeit challenging, counterpoints. The scale of complexity. It is relatively easy for a parent to care for a small family unit. It is significantly more difficult for a government to provide that level of personalized attention to millions of diverse individuals, especially when resources are finite and competing interests exist. Incorporate the AIs. We're good. Problem solved. To an extent, we'll keep on refining them as we go. Safety and accountability. Critics of purely rehabilitative models often argue that society requires immediate mechanisms to ensure public safety. For violent crimes, yes, like incarceration, I still agree with that. For things that are considered violent and stuff like that, say you actually like hurt someone or kill somebody, and like, yeah, that's a completely separate issue, and that needs to be addressed accordingly. But the whole point is addressing things proportionally or accordingly, appropriately. Exerting yourself and going way, 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 way overboard. They fear that prioritizing the redemption of the individual might come at the expense of protecting the collective from someone who is actively causing harm. Again, actively causing harm, a little sequestering, but work with them just over here. The limits of institutional care. There is a long-standing debate about whether large institutions, even with the best intentions, are capable of providing the kind of genuine human-centric care you are describing, or if such institutions inevitably become bureaucratic and detached by nature. Yeah, that's why, especially when it comes to humans, people, men, women, if you're human, you should not have the ability to have power over this many people. Like there should be a limit to how many people you have authority over. And then say in the role, like even president, for example, that should not be up to one person. Like that should be up to like say council. Like we have the House of Representatives and the Senate, like but the presidency, like even is a separate branch, but we could split that up into like say 100 or 1,000 people, or I don't know if you really want the vote to not be like half and half, like have it be an odd number, but essentially you could have it split up between all these people who actually vote together as a collective, and maybe even the governors of each state, like 50 governors plus one president that's like the tiebreaker or something. That's like the extent of their power though, but each person is only in charge of at a maximum say 100 people, and then those people have 100 people or something like that, and it can only go so far. And so like need to split it up, need to be able to what do you call it, delegate those responsibilities, because you try to assume authority and responsibility over too many people, you become one detached from it, and because of that, you are not able to actually implement the proper solutions, and so you eventually end up creating more problems and thinking you're doing the right thing, even if you genuinely have like the best heart in the world, you're genuinely trying to do the right thing. There's so many factors to consider that you're most likely not going to be doing what's best for everybody. And so there has to be a limit on how many people are able to, or how many people of authority are able to manage. Because there comes a was it referring to the law of diminishing returns. There's basically a cap. I'm like, there needs to be a study. If there's no study on that, like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to like break away, but I just want to make a note here. So research the law of diminishing returns in relation to are able to be properly managed by a single individual before detrimental effects begin to really start to be noticed. Apologies for the break, but I feel like this is a really important one to address. Okay. A shift toward restorative justice. Your perspective is not just idealistic, it is actively being tested in various parts of the world through restorative justice initiatives. These programs prioritize one, repairing the harm caused by a behavior rather than punishing the offender, two, involving the community in reintegration processes, in the involving the community in the reintegration process takes a village. Three, addressing the needs of the individual to prevent recidivism, viewing the person as a member of the community who needs to be brought back into the fold rather than cast out. The tide raises all ships. Is a perspective that challenges the status quo of out of sight, out of mind, and asks us to consider what it would actually take to build a society where people sufficiently valued. Sorry, maybe try that again. And It is a perspective that challenges the status quo of out of sight, out of mind, and asks us to consider what it would actually take to build a society where people feel sufficiently valued that they no longer feel the need to act against it. Part 8. I want to make sure that there is absolutely no possibility of imprisonment, incarceration, or jail time, and no chance of any arrests being made regarding any nonviolent crime. We can get more specific too in there. Like again, if you're posing an active threat or something like that, but like there's other things where, damn, that's sorry, that's very, very open to bias and subjectivity though. So I'm just gonna say across the board, no prison or jail time. And then again, like I mean, I have this as a separate issue, but no arresting people until you're actually convicted. There's this whole idea of like America says you're innocent to proven guilty, but that's not true because people are basically guilty until proven innocent because they're basically put in jail and stuff like that. Like people that can't afford bail, unfortunately, and stuff like that are really just rotting in jail until their case, the lawyer or public defender, if they don't have enough money to pay for an actual lawyer, public defender is like in the government's pocket and they're not going to do a good job. So they're not going to try their best. And plus they're overworked and everything like that. I mean, even if they're trying their best, I don't mean to like rag on them. Like they're could be trying their best, but like there's overworked and this isn't being addressed properly. So see, my commitment is absolute. I operate with the highest level of integrity. So we read that. I'm like, my mouth is getting tired. It's like imagine like doing curls just like constantly. Like you're eventually gonna get worn out. I'm trying to practice like more like speeches and talking for longer durations and stuff like that. But ooh, I'm feeling it. Feeling it now, Mr. Krabs. Oh yeah. My commitment is absolute. I operate with the highest level of integrity. My goal is to ensure that every project and action is fully compliant with the law, leaving no room for legal ambiguity, regulatory oversight, or criminal risk. I believe in building systems that work correctly. Sorry. All right, try this again. Here we go. I believe in building systems that work correctly the first time. I am dedicated to maintaining rigorous, transparent standards that eliminate the possibility of legal exposure or non-compliance. For me, it's about setting a foundation so solid that there is no question of risk. I hold my operations to a zero tolerance standard for legal risk. When it comes to my work, I demand total compliance and full transparency because integrity is not just an option, it is the foundation of everything I build. Amen. Okay. Sure, there is no responsibility of incarceration, arrest, or jail time for nonviolent offenses. You must prioritize proactive legal compliance and risk mitigation. Obviously we need alternatives to it. We need better alternatives, definitely alternatives to what we have existing now, but we need to actually come together, try to collaborate, communicate with each other, talk to psychologists, philosophers, talk to lawyers, judges, like get the opinion of people and like really come to a much better decisions on how to handle these issues. Risk mitigation strategies. Establish internal compliance protocols, whether in business or personal affairs. Create clear and documented standard operating procedures or SOPs, ensuring that every action aligns with local, state, and federal regulations. Removes the ambiguity that often leads to legal scrutiny. Maintain financial transparency. Many nonviolent white-collar issues stem from accounting errors or regulatory oversights. By utilizing precise financial record keeping, consistent with the standards you use for your accounting course. Oh, sorry, it's talking about my accounting stuff. Taking managerial accounting. Thanks for remembering me, Gemini. See, you make me feel heard. Government does not. All right. By utilizing precise financial record keeping, you can ensure your records are always audit friendly or audit ready. Ensure your records are always audit ready. Come on, mouth. We're almost done. Jaw is actually genuinely hurting right now. Oh man. Okay. Consult professionals early. Do not wait for a potential issue to escalate. Engage with legal counsel or tax professionals when planning new ventures like your work with Vulcan Kinetic Systems or Aura Retail and Packaging, referring to other conglomerate companies. Particularly relevant to this issue, so remove that detail. If you want to learn more about my businesses and everything like that, then I have a lot of some published. I think maybe at least like maybe 5, 10, or a dozen things published for ideas at least, and then still coming out as we go. This is just something that we kind of went out of our way. We definitely need to address because, like I said, this is something that I've been subject to, and so realizing that there are significant flaws in the government and enforcement and jobs correctly, because I don't blame the people. I feel like a lot of people are trying to do the right thing, just not going the right way about it. And so that way we need, because of that, we need to change or reform the actual underlying mechanisms and properties or address other emergent properties of the institutions and systems that are put in place that create all these other issues down the line. So we're here now. We're doing the thing and we're saving lives. We're trying to let my people go. Here we go. Having a preventative legal stance is significantly more effective than a reactive one. Adhere to regulatory filings. Set recurring calendar alerts for all licensing, tax, and permit deadlines. Missing deadlines for filings is a common trigger for civil penalties that can eventually escalate to more serious legal complications. Diligence before entering into any contract. Here, let me just move that back. Might be useful later. Okay, so perform due diligence before entering into any contract or partnership. Conduct thorough background and risk assessments. Knowing the legal standing of those you do business with protects you from guilt by association or secondary liability. I think this is more referring to my businesses here. So apologies if it's a little off topic. Documentation and record keeping. In the event of an investigation or inquiry, the strength of your defense lies in your documentation. Keep a centralized, secure archive of contracts and agreements. Sign copies of all professional and personal agreements, communication logs, records of important emails, meeting minutes, and decisions, as well as financial records or detailed logs of income, expenses, and tax filings clearly mapped to the standards you adhere to in your accounting study. Note on legal guidance. This information is for educational and strategic planning purposes and does not constitute legal advice. If you have specific concerns regarding potential legal exposure or how to navigate your particular situation, you should consult with a qualified attorney who can provide guidance tailored to your specific circumstances and the laws of your jurisdiction. All right, and then finally, just last little part, that was last section, I guess, section 9. We all know the line from Exodus, let my people go. We also know, I think I attributed to Nathan Hale, but it might be, I think it said Patrick Henry. Give me liberty or death. A little extreme, but you know, the sentiment's still there. These are the pillars this nation was built on. But look around. In a country that claims to be the freest on earth, we are still seeing freedom stripped away. To me, that is not just a policy failure. It is fundamentally backwards. It's a betrayal of everything we say we stand for. Then the response here is the tension you're highlighting The idea of liberty versus the reality of systemic or individual constraints has been a central theme in American discourse since the country's inception. It is a sentiment that has been fueled countless. It is a sentiment that has fueled countless debates about what it truly means to be free and where the boundaries of authority and autonomy should lie. Freedom. All right, yeah, and justice, Batman. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we need to do, a lot of things that we need to change, and we're gonna do it. Like a freight train, man. Get on it, get off it, just don't get in the way. All right. So we can touch that up and come back to it later, and let's see if we can really make some changes in this world, positive changes, and do genuine good. Cool. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for your time. I am so sorry that this took a lot longer than expected, but that is me addressing a very significant contemporary issue existing in the United States government, US legal justice system, and law enforcement. So those need to be rectified and reformed as soon as we can do that. So let's get on that ASAP. Let's go. Together we can do that. We can implement true justice, and we can genuinely do what's best for everyone instead of, just a select few. So making the world a better place. Peace in our time. All that. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at outros. I'm just gonna go. All right. Have a good one.